Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity, and Love. We've got a guest coming back. Episode 35, you saw Dr. Eben Alexander and Karen Newell join us, and now Eben's kind enough to come back. I want to say thank you personally to Eben for being so fantastic in the first show and for being brave enough to come back and share more with us. I'm very excited about this. He is a high school rival. I'm just going to cut to the chase. He went to Phillips Exeter Academy. I went to Phillips Academy Andover. I know I did 4 long years there, which is like doing time, except it was incredible. I want to give a little bit of, first, I want to welcome Eben to the show.
It's great to be here, Michael Andre. Thanks so much for having me on again.
Absolutely. And you're welcome to come back later in 2024. And I do want to mention, you just did the foreword for Proof of the Afterlife. It's like maybe the 13th book from Raymond Moody, Paul Perry, Afterlife researchers. You've had a lot of interaction with them for, many, many years. You met Raymond when he was still more skeptical about the possibility of the other side or just more consciousness. And you've watched him transform. You did the foreword to this new book. And I'm going to mention that Beyond Words Publishing happened to reach out to me, and they're both going to be guests. I think it's like episode 50, December 31st of 2023. So I'm excited to close out 2023 with both of them. Do you want to say a quick hello to Raymond?
I would love to. And I would like to point out to your audience that Raymond is, in case they haven't heard, he is really the father of the whole field of near-death experience studies. And when you realize how NDEs, near-death experiences, are the tip of the spear in this tremendous revolution in the understanding of consciousness in our modern scientific era, you'll realize how important a figure Raymond Moody is. So a big old shout out to Raymond and Cheryl. They're some of our best friends. I love how Raymond has always been a very skeptical, open-minded, philosophically sophisticated analyst of the human condition. And he writes beautifully. And this new book of his, Proof of the Afterlife, is a real game changer. Highly recommend that book.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm speaking with a neurosurgeon, academic neurosurgeon, been at places like Brigham, Harvard, I believe Duke, if I got that right, and a few others, obviously other spots. You've had appointments and taught at a bunch of places. We mentioned Phillips Exeter Academy, had to do that. Very difficult. We both agreed it was quite the obstacle course for learning. Okay, you're also an author. Near-death survivor is a claim to fame. And if you look Eben up in Wikipedia and so on and elsewhere, I recommend actually the Theosophical Society's video that is from about 9 years ago, 5.4 million views. If you go to episode 35 of this series, you're going to see a link in the video description I put up today to make sure you can find that video. It is an incredible lecture with a lot of detail about his experience. We're not going to necessarily get into that as much today, but we'll say E. coli meningitis in a coma. Science will still try to say there's no way you could have any of the lucid, very direct experiences you had. Your very first book was Proof of Heaven. I'm forgetting the name of that agency in DC. You hooked up with the literary something Yoon.
Ross Yoon.
Yeah,
Gail Ross.
Gail Ross, they took a real chance on this and it paid off. A New York Times bestseller. You've had a bunch of books since. I'm going to mention Map of Heaven in 2014, but also Living in a Mindful Universe 2017. That's another one people should check out. You co-authored it with Karen Newell, who again was on the show, co-founder of Sacred Acoustics. Check out the binaural beats there. Make sure you use headphones for that. And finally, you've been on SuperSoul Sunday. People can check that out. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. It's awesome you sitting down with Oprah describing things. She asked great questions. And one last thing that came up just before the show, you've got another website people can check out, innersanctum.com, where every 2 weeks during the pandemic, you interviewed people like Raymond Moody, and it's free for people to go and check out your interviews and interactions with those folks.
It is. And by the way, it's innersanctumcenter.com. So those 3 words, INNER, sanctumcenter.com. And it's actually an access point to a number of kind of interesting and useful videos and all of that. People can check it out. But that whole series of the pandemic interviews that we did with globally renowned thought leaders on consciousness, other experiencers, et cetera. I think that's a real gold mine for people, and it's absolutely free. So I highly recommend people go visit innersanctumcenter.com and start listening to those interviews. There's also a mental health practitioner course on there that we did with Dr. Anna Yusim about binaural beats and sacred acoustics for deep meditation, especially for relief of anxiety and that kind of thing. And then there's also a monthly webinar that we do with our fans that's available on innersanctumcenter.com. So those are all options for people who want to get deeper into all this. And of course, EbenAlexander.com is another site that has much useful information about the books, links to interviews, a very good recommended reading page that's categorized, and also has hot links to many of the scientific papers. And there's also an FAQ page on that site that's an antidote to some of the nonsense about me out on the internet, including that Wikipedia piece, which remains a Gestapo hit piece ad hominem.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of positive stuff in there, but I'm pretty sure that everyone in your shoes and the whole spiritual path has had a lot of that as well. Let's get on to, there are the eternal questions, what it is to be human, the human condition. We're going to get into some of the big picture stuff. We're going to get into your experiences in a second. But let's go to something basic. Everyone is living their life. They've got their own unique life path, whether they didn't know it or not. A lot of us feel stuck or jammed, or my problem is, my situation is, and it's hard to believe there's more room for maneuver. Can we kind of go big picture, but practical advice or a reminder to everyone out there, whether they're a seasoned healer for 40 years, or they've never heard of Oprah or spirituality or angels or anything, can you pull us all back to what the common thread is? How, even though there might be an afterlife, there is an afterlife, there's more around us, within us, how can we go about living our days in a more full way? How can we slow down more? Can you give us the pep talk on that front?
Well, I think the most important thing to point out is we are all deeply involved in this journey together. Our culture, our kind of scientific materialism pretends that we're all separate beings. And in fact, the whole situation gets inflamed because when all that thinking was evolving in the 20th century, it also came packaged with a misinterpretation of Darwinian evolution, to focus only on competition and survival of the fittest, as opposed to realizing what any biologist today will tell you is that far more common principles that guide what goes on in the animal kingdom are collaboration and cooperation. And so when you take all of that kind of separateness and, we're against each other in a world of limited resources, that creates a very kind of disturbing and anxiety-provoking situation. But that's not the deeper truth. The deeper truth, as is revealed through the dying process, whether it's through near-death experiences, shared death experiences, which are just like near death, but happen in perfectly healthy people, after-death communications, end-of-life dreams and visions, what have you, every bit of it points to love, to oneness, to shared meaning and purpose, that we're all truly in this together. The life review in NDEs is in many ways a giant golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, written into the very fabric of the universe. So in other words, when we kind of shift our focus from the headlines of our materialist and ego besotted culture, and start kind of going within and using meditation and centering prayer and kind of reflecting on our lives and how we influence other people, how we can view our relationship with the universe, it starts to become a much rosier picture. And how astonishing that to find that beautiful rose coloring, we're looking at the phenomenon of death, of bodily death, and the transition that's involved. Because what that does is it teaches us that we're all eternal souls, and that our relationships with loved ones do not end with the death of a physical body. And this is a very comforting message to many, many people in this world. And that's really kind of the simple answer to your question about how, to kind of come into some peace and a sense of harmony with the world at large. And I would say it's largely through focusing on these bigger topics and things like death as a catalyst that involves a transformation of all involved, both those who are left here on the physical world and those who are departing this world. all are being greatly transformed through that process. And it's not the bleak and paltry fiction that materialist science tries to pretend, that your conscious awareness just grinds to a halt when your brain and body die. It's actually the opposite. They're liberated from the shackles of the prison. And so this is really the kind of thing Karen and I talk about all the time. And it's what we try and teach people. And it's what we do in our workshops and play shops, both live and, by Zoom. But it really is a way of kind of shifting our focus, getting away from that little ego mind. And the ego mind, it serves a minimal purpose in this world, but as spiritual beings, we can grow far beyond that little simple and puny self-focused ego mind into a much more, all-focused, higher good-focused, kind of angel-centric view of the way the world really works. And this is something that I think can be very comforting to a lot of people in the current age of angst and polarization.
Oh my God. So if I had a microphone that wouldn't break my foot, big heavy one right here, that's a microphone drop moment. Okay, so grow your awareness, not your thinking. Fear gets peddled a lot, but we do our own judging and thinking and resistance and negativity, reacting, stress, fear, worry, and stuff. We generate tons, and that's what we can control. So a little less of that, a little more just let go and be. I'm going to give a quote from angels. Compassion for all is life. This is also about acceptance for all. Regard others as yourself generously and without fixation. Believe in all. And it's much simpler than people think. Again, this is because this is not about thinking, but less thinking. Open yourself up to life. So with that, I'm going to mention animal videos on Twitter X, whatever it's called these days. You'll see a lot of cross species hugging when they're kids, pets, puppies, cats, but ducks, ducklings. That's a really bad example, but it actually isn't. And then if we go to, and forgive me for the audience for this, UFO, aliens, everything else, it's a huge thing on the internet these days. Look, there's light beings that are unconditional love, light. Angels, light beings. Your relatives are in the ones who have transitioned fully. How do I do this? They're love. They're there to support you. And then there's a lot of species out there. Let's just say that some of them, if you go out for a bite, maybe you're not coming back. I say stick with the unconditional love crew. You can get all your answers and more. And there's much more around us, within us, than we're ever going to realize through a scientific lab or a research paper. But keep doing those. Okay, Eben, tell us a little bit about which direction you want to go right now. You've had a lot of experiences, and a lot of experiences at the societal level. Can we just touch upon, if you're the space shuttle with heat shield tiling, you've had a few of those get singed because you didn't know what you were getting into. With having E. coli, meningitis, coma, you should have died. The odds are at least a 1 in 1,000, if not 1 in a million, that you couldn't have come back, if I got that right. And you had all these experiences on the other side, or just in the broader reality that we're in. Can you tell us a little bit about the societal experience? It's like Plato's cave. You went out of the cave, but you came back in to try to tell everybody else what your experience was. And it wasn't always welcoming.
Well, I'll tell you the interesting thing. People often say, what do your skeptical scientific colleagues make of all this? And it turns out when I look back on the 15 years since my coma, what I find is my greatest support has come from my skeptical scientific colleagues. And that includes a lot of scientific colleagues who I didn't even know before, but who I have found are very fascinated by this work. In fact, I participate in several online groups of communication with different scientific communities that are deeply into this. And it's a long, long way beyond where, the New York Times and Newsweek or Scientific American might kind of put their money in terms of, advances in the scientific world. This goes way beyond that. And yet a lot of very respectable scientists, including Nobel laureates in quantum physics like Roger Penrose and Brian Josephson. A lot of very high-end scientists have come down realizing that the stories we tell, this kind of afterlife experience and reincarnation, is completely consistent with modern science. In fact, in many ways, quantum physics demands this notion of this kind of free will, this kind of spiritual essence of us. It will not really tolerate a purely mechanistic world that's independent of humans and their thinking and sentient beings in general. And so it's kind of astonishing, even though I will say the lay scientific press, scientific journalists, et cetera, they have even less courage than many of the scientists who have made the leap. And that's why, one of the reasons why, if you're just reading New York Times and Scientific American, you're not necessarily getting exposed to this. Although luckily, I will say that, for example, Scientific American has had the courage to publish some very kind of revolutionary pieces recently. And in particular, I would point to what they put out there from Bernardo Kastrup. Kastrup with a K. And he's one of the endorsers of our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. And we strongly endorse Bernardo's work. He's done an incredible job. He's a great voice for true kind of scientific, idealistic realism in the current era. Highly recommend his writings. But it turns out that a lot of scientists are on board with this. In fact, it's gotten harder and harder to find anybody who qualifies as a discussant for the quote materialist position. That used to be a big thing back when Proof of Heaven first came out in 2012. Was they wanted to find an objective skeptical scientist to debate me on my experience. And so to participate in the game, I did that a few times early on. But it really turns out that once scientists start studying this field in depth, they realize that materialism is dead. It died 80 years ago. And yet in this discussion, you still have the occasional person who will claim to be scientifically educated. But I can tell you right now, I'll give you the clue. All they have to do is go to bigelowinstitute.org, because there you will find 28 essays that are scientifically validated in many ways by respected scientists, all of whom have demonstrated at least 5 years of work in this field and the afterlife studies. And those 28 essays at bigelowinstitute.org will change your world. And you'll realize that it's no longer a question of whether a scientist wants to debate all this. The evidence all points in one very powerful direction, and that's towards our spiritual nature and a spiritual universe, and not towards some blind mechanistic world where we're just automated biological meat robots, and when our brain and body die, that's the end of our conscious awareness. That's not the world we live in. And the scientific world is studying this tremendously, and that we should move beyond, these kind of petty objections by pseudo-skeptical materialist kind of pseudoscientists who claim that all this is bunk, that NDEs are hallucinations, and reincarnation, you must be kidding me. Well, no, the scientific data shows the reality of all this. We simply have to grow up enough and mature into the kind of sentient beings that can actively reflect and understand where all this empirical data is leading us.
Hey, I've got to say, Robert Bigelow has really been quietly, but not so quietly, on the forefront of a lot of consciousness raising or just pushing the bounds, but on maybe the scientific front. He's had a lot of experiences, his family, his wife, all the other stuff as well. I had a chance to have whiskeys, 2 different whiskeys with Jeffrey Mishlove. He never took any steps with me. I don't think I was blowing sage through the 2 computer screens to the recipient, whether it's Lorna Byrne in Ireland. She's my most popular show this year for Angels, Positivity, and Love. We broke 1,300 views with her, but she caught the smell of daisies and roses. But Jeffrey was just at the point of diving in for 6 months to put his paper together. I think the top prize was $500,000, which at the time I would have never known, Jeffrey was gonna win that, and he did. But so we're having whiskey because his show, I think it's New Thinking Aloud. I always get everything wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, but he's had everybody on. In a way, he and Alan Steinfeld and a few other shows have been there for the long haul, thousands and thousands of shows. And so he's been almost like the pulse of the whole, spiritual awareness, science, everything where it meets. And so it was fascinating talking to him, but it had always been my dream, because I go out and knock on everyone's door. Angel community, do you want to meet angels? And they're like, go away, slam the door. We don't want to meet angels. Buddhist community, do you want to meet Buddha? Blah, blah, blah. So 8,000 no's, but 4,000 yeses. he said yes to a whiskey. I just wanted to hang with someone, have a glass of whiskey and chat. And he was so kind to do that. So I had to mention that. Check out all his shows. Again, he put in a lot of effort. But my quick thing is 6 months of research and then judging and then having to win it and then all the after effects as well. You got to pay your taxes. And in 15 minutes, people can have this experience. It's a lot for people to allow for, but are you willing to look out in your yard and see directly or to listen? It's basic listening. It's basic awareness. I'm going to remind everybody you're doing it during the day, unconsciously. So many acts of full openness, but you give yourself no credit for it. So can we talk a little bit on that, how everyone's fully capable to live more, love more? You've experienced so much, scientific level, but personally, and I have a feeling you're every day evolving into more love. And I know that sounds glib or too sparkly, but tell us a little bit more about your personal journey, how you're embracing more all the time.
Well, it's a beautiful question. It's a very practical issue, in terms of coming to a daily sense of understanding of reality and how we kind of view our world. And for me, it's been kind of a long and yet beautiful process that really has gone through my whole life. But I love how the near-death experience and my 15 years of assimilation of that experience since then has contributed greatly. And of course, I must credit the most important element of this whole thing has been my partner, Karen Newell. I mean, she has been just an amazing spiritual teacher and resource. She's been living her entire life as an idealist. And she's the one who would keep reminding me, this former Harvard neurosurgeon who was so into brain-mind consciousness and kept talking about brain and mind and their relationship. And she's always the one there reminding me it's that love that ultimately is the most important message. That unconditional love is a binding force that brings us all together and helps us to focus on what I would say is our true spirituality. And for spirituality, I will point out, yes, religions can be useful for spiritual growth, for going within, centering prayer, meditation, for developing our personal relationship with the universe. But sadly, religions often kind of take the very low road of kind of ideological control of other humans. And so this is really kind of a freer way of looking at our spirituality that's not necessarily hinged in 2,000-year-old scripture and ideologies that can go back hundreds of years and may not really reflect our life experience and our current existence. But that's where personal experience and having tools to go within, I think, are so important. I kept up my little myth after my coma of believing if I studied hard enough, I would explain it all. So in the first 2 years after my coma, I read about 150 books. You know what that mentality comes from the Exeter Andover axis. Go to the library, study it, you'll figure it out. Well, what I realized after about 2 years and 150 books on quantum physics, on spiritual traditions, East and West, books on angels, books on all kinds of spiritual topics, was the only way to really get it was I had to develop a regular practice of going within. And that has been incredibly important. I recommend it to everyone to especially gain a little refuge from the onslaught of insanity of our modern world with the headlines pinging on our smartphones every few minutes, and none of it very good news. That's not the world we have to live in. We can live in a world that we have a much kind of grander sense of connection with. But for me, that absolutely involves a daily practice of going within using meditation. And I was first familiar 2 years post-coma when I made this commitment to going within with the notion of binaural beat brainwave entrainment as a very powerful tool. And I understood from neuroscientific principles why it would be so useful. And that a lot of that knowledge was based on a Scientific American article on binaural beats in the brain by Gerald Oster, written in Scientific American in, I think it was in September of '74. It was around that time. But anyway, it clued me in on the fact that these tones influence the lower brainstem. And I believe that's one of the reasons they can be so powerful. Pretty much every sound, anthem, chant, hymn that you've ever heard that might have engendered a transcendental state of conscious awareness, those are all processed up in the acoustic cortex of the temporal lobes in circuits that are mainly 2 or 3 million years in their recent evolution. And that's very different from the sounds of sacred acoustics, another binaural beat brainwave entrainment, which involves the difference in frequency of the sounds to the two ears. And that's why headphones are so important in listening. But that oscillation of having these signals bouncing back and forth in the lower brainstem, it does the same thing that other forms of hypnosis do. If you think about watching people get hypnotized, like a swinging pendulum, and our eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is EMDR, a technique that's very effective in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. And what these techniques have in common is they involve using anywhere in the midbrain down to the lower brainstem, the medulla, a left-right oscillation. And there's something about that that seems to free up conscious awareness. And for me, the experience was very dramatic. The way, once I learned to just ride those tones, put that little voice in my head into timeout, because the biggest lesson here is to realize that our consciousness is not that little running stream of thoughts in our head. You know, I love how Michael Singer, in his book, The Untethered Soul, he calls that voice in your head your annoying roommate. And that is the best way to put it. Because meditation is all about silencing that little voice, putting it into timeout, and cultivating a relationship with your higher soul, you know, across the veil into that primordial mind. And this is where I found meditation to be incredibly powerful and useful. And it has to do, excuse me, with that effect of the oscillation in the lower brainstem. Excuse me 1 second.
Cultivating the space between thoughts, so you're in your heart more and actually doing the important stuff. Living, basic living, love, that's all that matters. And I think you'll get to that next from some of your experiences. Love is all there is the big message. Good luck believing that when you've got bills to pay, a divorce pending, your house mortgage, you're looking for a job, and all the other life situations. Okay, back to what you're saying.
Well, it really gets back to the love that you're talking about, because that is the kind of ultimate deep lesson. That's the ambience of these journeys. And what I found out early on is that I could get back into that through meditation, not just to recover memories from my near-death experience, but to develop and cultivate ongoing relationships with the various guides and angels that I witnessed there. For example, that beautiful guardian angel that was so important to me, as I reported in the book Proof of Heaven. And I found out 4 months post-coma, her identity. And that was the shocker that forced me to realize the reality of the journey. You know, I've been going back and forth trying to make sense of it. How could it be way too real to be real? And then, of course, reviewing all my medical records. And then, of course, there's a medical case report that helps people get to the deeper understanding of those medical records, because 3 doctors not involved in my care wrote the case report published in Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, September 2018. And they made it crystal clear that my brain was far too damaged to have any kind of dream or hallucination. Very important. That's why my case was so important to the scientific community. But even more kind of amazing was, how did I muster this recovery? You know, my doctors estimated I'd gone from a 10% chance of survival early in that week of coma down to a 2% by the end of the week, by that Sunday morning, when they held a conference recommending they stop the antibiotics and take me off the ventilator. And they estimated at that point 2% chance of recovery, but they didn't see any way that that would result in a major recovery of function. They thought survival was possible, but envisioned mainly me being in a nursing home the rest of my life. And that's where everybody was so shocked. And in those first 2 months, I ended up having a complete recovery with all my memories returning, including more complete memories than they had been before coma. All that was a giant mystery to me as a neuroscientist, as a neurosurgeon, and I had to explain it. And initially, of course, I defaulted to that materialist position that the dying brain plays all kinds of tricks. That's what my doctors told me. Yep. But that was before I had reviewed my medical records and went, well, wait a minute. There's something wrong with this picture. This brain that I am studying the records of is not in any condition to harbor a dream or hallucination, much less the most profound, transformative, detailed, and memorable experience of my entire existence, and one that I remember today as briskly and completely as if the whole thing happened yesterday, and it had happened almost 15 years ago. So how does all that happen? How do all those memories disappear and then end up returning? And we explain a lot of that in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and make it clear that, memories are not even stored in the brain. That's such a nail in the coffin of materialist neuroscience. You don't hear it discussed very much, but neurosurgeons have discussed it for a while, because we realize that there's never been a case in more than 100 years of major brain resections of any permanent swathe of long-term memories being deleted by a brain operation and resection. It never happens. Excuse me. Even in cases of hemispherectomy, where, in young children who have severe seizure disorders, sometimes the only way to control the seizures is remove half the brain. And that can be the dominant side or not. In a very young infant, they have a way of, through neuroplasticity, of rewiring the other hemisphere. But you find you never remove memory by removing brain. So that whole kind of materialist concept that memories live in the brain is something that the neuroscience behind it does not support. And my statements about that are all in perfect agreement with a beautiful book that Wilder Penfield, one of the most renowned neurosurgeons in the 20th century. He was in Canada, in Montreal, but he wrote a book in 1975 called The Mystery of the Mind. And in that book, he makes it very clear, as a neurosurgeon, stimulating the brain in awake patients. Now, I did a lot of those procedures myself, so I know all the trials and tribulations of those techniques. But I defer to his wisdom on it, because he devoted most of his career to that kind of study, and basically came to the conclusion that memories were not stored anywhere in the neocortex. And he thought, as a default materialist position back in 1975, maybe they're stored in the brainstem, even though to most people that didn't make much sense, because the complexity of detailed memory is enabled by the neocortex, but not by the brainstem. You don't have the kind of varied anatomy there that could really support such an incredible abundance of remembered details. And yet Penfield came to realize it's not even the neocortex that's part of it. So, and our work, especially in Living in a Mindful Universe, you'll come to realize that nowhere in the brain are these memories stored. Nowhere in the brain is consciousness manufactured. The brain is a filter, a reducing valve, or a transceiver that allows us to interact with primordial consciousness, primordial mind, that is all unified through that binding force of love. And that's where, that connecting of the dots with near-death experiences, with life reviews. How life reviews are often described more as a reliving than a remembering of events. And not only that, the events are experienced in the life review from the perspective of those around you who were impacted by your actions and thoughts. So it shows us we're really sharing the dream of the one mind. And in a very concrete and realistic fashion, we're all in this together. So to hurt another is to hurt yourself. That is one of the most primary lessons that comes out of near-death experiences, and should inform our spirituality and our efforts at understanding our relationship with the universe and with each other.
I love it. Okay, so a couple things there. One, I'm going to mention that Karen will have already taped by now. She already has taped. And her episode comes out October 22nd, which is in the past, episode 40. So check out her appearance on Angels, Positivity, and Love solo. Episode 35 was both Karen and Eben. But Eben's coming out, episode 44, on November 19th is when you're watching this. And back to what you were just saying, back to Angels as well, saying this. So anything that I say that's sharp, I'm actually always borrowing from Angels or, Chogyam Trungpa or somebody. Through awareness and owning the consequences of one's thoughts and actions, a person begins to see how all of life is truly interconnected in one. Faith in all can lead to a change in mankind. This is the path for all of man. This is about man bringing peace and joy to all. And this is about your personal growth in your life and finding the next stage in your soul's development, as well as the continued evolution of mankind. The greatest gift is allowing all is growth and change. This is frightening for some. There's nothing to do here. Slow down the doing. Instead, breathe, smile, and relax. Appreciate all. And last little bit, we already touched on compassion for all is life. This is also about acceptance for all. Regard others as yourself. That was the prelude to the previous quote. Can you talk to us on a practical side? Each one of us is going through our day, but without tapping into the usual suggested daily techniques. Let's say somebody doesn't have time to take 15 minutes for meditation and they're rushing around doing errands. How can they slow down and foster that awareness as they're moving? If you don't mind just touching into that, how can we all tap what we've got as we go through our daily routines? But if we don't have time that particular day, how can we simply be more in the moment and more aware?
Well, an important point to make is this process. I've been using Sacred Acoustics binaural beat brainwave entrainment for an hour or two a day for the last 11 or 12 years. So, and I promise you that by doing that, and there are many days when I don't have that time. Okay. So there are many days when I'd love to meditate, in this moment, but I don't have time. I've got way too much to do. But as long as I can put the meditation in sometime, it doesn't even have to be in that 24 hours, but it's the regular practice of meditation that is the answer to your question. Because what happens is over time, the mind and your kind of conscious awareness and your interaction with the world around us starts to shift because of the gains that you make in these meditative experiences. And these are gains with a kind of connecting with the universe, gaining an instinct, an intuition, kind of magnifying our empathy for others. And this is where that magic of meditation really works out, not just in the time of meditation, but in living our lives between. And in fact, the most important lesson from all of this, beginning, with the discussion of consciousness and near-death experiences, is really this acknowledgement that that we are so much more than our physical bodies and that we have that interconnection. But it's not about what happens when we die. That's not the most important kind of take-home message from all this. The important take-home message is how do we live this life here and now, every breath, so that it more accurately and powerfully reflects our knowledge of our relationship with the universe and with our fellow beings and that binding force of love, and expresses it in our actions and our thoughts. That's where the magic starts to happen. And I think all of us as sentient beings have the power to go within and start gaining these benefits. Now, do know that, of course, we all carry various challenges from our childhood, the things that Karen and I call baby wounds. Now, for me, an example of baby wound is that I was put up for adoption by my 16-year-old unwed mother when I was 11 days old. But it was really that I had failure to thrive. I was on a hunger strike, and that's why I got hospitalized by social services. And you find that babies that sense that they're not wanted by their mother will often do that. They will go into that pattern of kind of exiting the world by not eating. And so social workers took me away. My birth mother wasn't ready to sign the papers, and she waited 4 months to do that. So I had 4 months in a baby dorm to kind of work this through. And that's not a way to start your life. Now, I'm not asking for any sympathy because I was adopted into a wonderful, loving family that honored all my hopes and dreams. So yeah, I lucked out. But that little 4-month period early in my life of being in a baby dorm with a bunch of other babies, most of whom came there for a week or two and then were adopted, that left a kind of a smoking crater in my life as to whether or not I was worthy of love. I didn't acknowledge that, but it was there lurking way down underneath, deep in my subconscious, which is the way baby wounds work. And many of us have those kinds of issues from our childhood. And we could have had a real trauma. I didn't have, a major trauma, although that abandonment wound of adoption is a real thing. Okay. It's a very real thing. I came to witness that fully. But the real gift here is that this kind of approach, meditation, centering prayer, going within, putting that ego voice into timeout, because your ego uses fear and anxiety as its tools. It's of no real value to you as a higher spiritual being. except to live this life once you realize that you're not limited to the ego and its kind of petty desires that are right there at the heart of addictions and fears and all this stuff. But this is about expanding and growing beyond those baby wounds. So initially on meditation, on using Sacred Acoustics tones, for example, you might start feeling some heaviness in the heart, that kind of thing. But it's stuff that needs to be processed, needs to be let go of. And that's how the baby wound can be there for such a long time, is in many ways they're hidden. Certain confrontations when we were young children. I remember, in fact, one very specific example of my adoptive father, the globally renowned neurosurgeon, so important in my life. And when he was visiting us in England in 1987, when I was doing a fellowship, and when he was there as a visiting professor of neurosurgery. It turns out that in this very personal moment with my former spouse, who was 7 months pregnant at the time, my father broke down. He really broke down, literally just crying, and we didn't know what was going on. There was something about being there with a grandson on the way, all this incredible excitement. There I was fulfilling my career in this fellowship in England, and he was there as a visiting professor. And something about all of that allowed him to unravel and get right down to something he hadn't talked about in 60 some years. And it was a conflict between him and his sister. And his mother ended up choosing the sister. And that was still haunting him that many years later. And he never talked about anything like that. It was completely out of the blue, but it showed me how these baby wounds can kind of be in there and haunt us for a long period of time. And only in the right set of circumstances do they kind of emerge into the light where we can identify them, address them, befriend them, wish them well, and then let them go. And so this is really something all of us have the power to do. Our ego mind is not going to be participating in this adventure. And that's why it's so important to learn that you're much more than your ego self. And by spending that regular, 20 minutes a day or what have you for meditation, for going within, for communicating with your higher soul and with that God force at the core of the universe, and just expressing gratitude for all the blessings in your life, that is what gives you the fuel time after time when you develop a regular practice of that going within, to start to identify with your angels and your guides and your higher soul, and with a loving, benevolent force at the core of the universe that more than 90% of near-death experiencers have discovered to be absolutely real, that God force. And this is something all of us have access to. And this is how we can kind of grow into our higher souls. It obviously involves a shift in our understanding of how we interact with the world on our daily kind of thinking and interactions, and how we view ourselves in our relationship with the universe, and how we view a shared sense of purpose and meaning with our fellow beings. But all of this can contribute to a much more mature and refreshing and liberating kind of relationship on a daily basis with the universe at large. So it's really a way of shifting your thinking, your understanding, your view of self, and your view of the universe, and the kind of working rules of the universe that enables you to grow into the soul you truly came here to be. So to me, it's been an absolutely spectacular gift. But I've also come to realize that along the pathway, very important were the hardships. You often hear about this notion of the soul agreement, that our higher souls and soul groups, determine who's going to play what role and what are going to be our kind of friction points in this lifetime. And I'm convinced that that's a reality. And I've seen evidence in my own meditations of how my higher soul preferred to have those particular challenges. The abandonment wound, my adoption, yes, check that one off. That'll be a very valuable teacher over multiple decades of my life. Alcohol, I struggled with alcohol very early in my career. It was never a problem at work, but on my nights off call during my training years, I tended to lean a little too heavily into that scotch. And so in 1991, with the help of my family and a lot of love, I stopped drinking, and I have never regretted it at all. When I look back on it all, I am grateful Not just that, I had my NDE and came to some resolution of that baby wound of the adoption abandonment, and not just that I, escaped, the scourge of alcoholism, but the fact that I had those challenges in the first place. If I hadn't had the challenges to live through, my soul wouldn't have had the kind of growth that it's had through those hardships. So embrace the hardships. Come to see the love the universe has for you. I'm convinced that there's a lot of kind of these milestones, these kind of challenges in life that serve kind of to guide our way. And it's our free will expression of how we respond to those challenges that I think is the mode by which our souls grow into a much more mature form. This is how we make progress. This is what makes life worthwhile, is to have this kind of soul growth that I'm talking about. But it only comes from this bigger picture of reflection and of interaction. And the one last point I'd like to make about all that is that this mode gets you into a timeless mode. That's one of the values of the near-death experience. They are not locked in Earth time at all. They occur in a realm of basically eternity, where the soul can go through all kinds of transformations. And yet, ultimately, we find that the stage setting for much of that activity, the time flow of events here on Earth, is in many ways set up to support a fiction. But there's a much deeper ordering of time that I call deep time or meta time that is associated with that spiritual realm. That's why, people often describe a life review, birth, death, everything in between, even before, life after. You can see events all across that spectrum occurring in real time for you there in that deep time or meta time. And the important point to make about that is it enables a much richer kind of networking of ideas when you can see across time and space. You see the connections of events in your life much more readily. And that is something that can be accomplished not just through an NDE or a profound organic, spiritually transformative experience, but can be cultivated through meditation and centering prayer. So that's where all of us can start to go into that timeless realm and start to sense more of the interrelationships of various events and conditions of our life, and start to see a pathway forward that's very instructive, that helps us to really grow into the soul we came here to be.
Incredible. I love that answer. We covered so much in that. I'm going to mention just like 5 quick little items. Christmas Carol, dust it off, whether it's the animated Disney movie or whatever, but the ghost of Christmas past, present, future, it's kind of tied into all this. I'm going to separately say happiness is obtained in the absence of ego. All is contrast. We can look at it as a negative, the hardships, the hand that we've been dealt. We look at our Texas Hold'em hand. We're like, oh my God, I got a lot of, 2, 3, 5, 7, not a flush or a straight. But it's what we make of the hand. It's not the rules of the game. You get to create the rules. So your 2s can become aces, or you can make that 3 a 2 and have 5 2s. Joke. Okay, but free will is paramount, and it's how you play the hand, and the hand is here. It's your heart. Love, 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 love. Everything's your instructions. So when you get triggered, react, stress, judge another. Oh, I don't like that politician. I don't like that country. I don't like that sports team. I don't like my opponent. That is our opportunity in the moment to switch from up here, that flow of energy, Darth Vader stuff, to more the Force, the Yoda stuff, and embrace all. Good luck doing it, but that is something that transforms everything you then touch after that. Trying to control outcomes. There's a huge desire in society, which has always been there. I went through it in the 80s at Middlebury. I sat next to somebody in a class. It was multiculturalism was what it was called back then. I got an A in the class. I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't the football player 4 seats over who challenged everything and ended up almost failing the class. So in a way, I failed because I went for the A instead of challenging everything. You're supposed to in university, come out a changed person by questioning everything. There's a great desire to remove the pain, to remove the experiences of life. So you walk a smoother path, but it's forced by society or the state or an organization. And that is actually, it's the contrast, the flavor of what we have in life that are our opportunities, as Eben has just graciously, there's a better word for that, amazingly described. So I want to get to that. Peaceful Warrior, the movie, has this, the deleted scenes as well, thinking how it blocks your living. And you could be the greatest athlete you think, and you are on paper, but you can be a greater athlete. It's a gymnastics movie, a little bit like Karate Kid, an adult version. I recommend people check that out. Dan Millman, check out his books. But so there's more available to each person, and they're not going to believe it because they're stuck in the middle of what they think their life situation is: career, relationships, lack, my childhood, my illness, my this, my that. And so, Eben, let's get back to, 5 takeaways you've had. If you're an airplane pilot or an Air Force pilot, you've got 40,000 hours on the stick, and you've had a lot of experiences, and you've put it into books. You've given a lot of speeches. Don't forget Theosophical Society from 8.5 years ago, 5.4 million views. Go to episode 35. You'll find the link there. How could you sum this up? Again, you're going out to the store. You constantly are going back to your checking account. It's not a big number, and you're worried about paying the bills or feeding your kids. Can you break it down for thousands of people out there? How can they take heart, literally?
1, gratitude. Never forget gratitude. Every breath I've had since I woke up from coma, November 16th of 2008, has been a breath of gratitude that demands nothing else of this world. Just thank you for this, for every bit of it. That is a crucial lesson. Never forget forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the greatest kind of choices any of us can make, and this includes forgiving self and forgiving others. Now, I'm not talking about, you don't have to go out and make some big public, forgiveness of somebody who has wronged you, but in your own mind, the important thing is to release them, to forgive them in your heart so that they don't own you, own that free space in your head. And forgiveness is an incredibly powerful tool because it liberates the forgiver. And the other thing I would point out, kind of reflecting on what you said a few minutes ago about others and how, we can kind of sense wrong in others and what have you, and the offensiveness of others and what, all of that. I always love that quote from Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher. And I'm paraphrasing here. I don't remember the exact words, but something, if you find something objectionable in another, look inside yourself. That's the essence of it. And when you truly come to realize that we are sharing the dream of the one mind, and that our mental space, although it seems to be ours alone, it has a tremendous amount of overlap with other mental space of those who are still alive, as well as those who've left the physical plane. And just remember how powerful that whole kind of set of concepts is about the connection of the one mind, shared meaning and purpose. Every bit of this comes to life in a much more realistic fashion as we start to develop these ideas, start living our lives as the unconditionally loving of beings that are capable of kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance. Again, when necessary, forgiveness. Never forget that gratitude. But we're sharing the dream of the one mind. And that means that hurting another is hurting ourselves. And the more we can elevate love and loving behaviors in our choices of everyday life, the better a place this world will be, because souls will be growing in a positive direction along a transformative pathway that leads us into a brilliant kind of novel future. That's where we are headed. I would say that this paradigm shift in understanding and humanity away from materialism and towards idealism or panentheism is further and further acknowledging this oneness and this kind of shared meaning and purpose, and how we can all help each other and are really here to help each other. And by helping others, you're helping yourself. Every bit of it depends on that binding force of love that is the very substance of what near-death experiences are made of. That's what people who have come close to dying and then come back to this world share this beautiful story, because that is the fundamental nature of who we are. And we find it out, especially at those jagged edges of existence, around birth and death. They're both transformations, transitions, but none of them are endings of anything. but they certainly mark transitions in kind of our phase and what we're going through in life, and our opportunities for learning and growth shift with these transitions. But this is where this kind of broader view of kind of higher soul and its larger mission can be so liberating.
Another one out of the park. The leather came off the baseball and it went and hit a car in the parking lot out there. Okay. So we're in late November and you're talking to us, November 19th and on in the Angels Positivity and Love series. But back in September 29th was the 6th Mind, Body, Spirit panel, which technically you and I are taping 2 days in the future to confuse everybody. But that's how not important time is. If you let angels or just the universe help you, you can go beyond time and what you know long enough to love more, as you were just mentioning. So you're on a Mind, Body, Spirit panel with two other amazing folks you've crossed paths with, given a hug to even recently, one of them, I think, at a conference. So it's Ingrid Hankala, PhD. She was NASA and US Navy's, an oceanographer with them, but also Columbia, the country, the military, the Columbia Navy's head of their ecology, marine biology department. She's had 3 near-death experiences, and Michelle Clare, psychic medium, incredible in Arizona. She's had 3 psychic near-death experiences. Now, I don't recommend having to die or come close, but it's sometimes written in part of your life path. It's what you got to go through. Sometimes you need more than one. It's about the foundation that you're being given, what you signed up for coming in. And to me, it just means a bigger heart and a bigger ability to serve others. Even if you think it's, Bethany Hamilton, the surfer who had her arm bitten off by a shark, spent a while in the movie Soul Surfer, wondering, why me, going in circles. We all do that. But when do you want to come out of the spinning, the ego, the thinking? And you can let ego serve as a reminder for anything. It's up to you how you want to handle your energy flows. So with that, can you talk to us? What's one memory from lucid, I'm going to use the wrong language, but connecting to the other side, hanging out with angels or the universe? What's one memory that you're about to go for a walk or something disturbing comes in and it's an oasis as a memory of just refreshment, a reminder why it's love, 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 love. I know you've got a lot of experiences on the other side. What's the one, though, that you could share that paints the picture and people are like, oh my gosh, I want what he's having?
It was that central message that I was to bring back from my NDE. As I describe in Proof of Heaven and in so many of these talks, and that is that beautiful guardian angel on the butterfly wing, looking at me with a look of pure love, and her awareness, her emotional truth coming into my mindset and dominating it, just being, this is the rule of the universe. And I think it was the most important lesson of my NDE, and certainly the most important lesson I was to bring back to this world. You are deeply loved and cherished. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for. And just envisioning that moment, I mean, my heart starts pounding. I just get chills. I know when I've shared the story of Betsy, of my, guardian angel, hundreds of times on stage, my eyes would mist up and tears would come to my eyes. And I was amazed how, even though I was so used to sharing the story, that it always brought such raw emotional power to me, of gratitude and these tears of joy. And then I realized people would take pictures of me when I was giving this talk up on stage, and there'd be the slide with my beautiful guardian angel pictured, the same picture that was my revelation 4 months post-coma of who she was. And there would be orbs on the photograph that these people took. And I realized she was there with me. That's why I felt it every time. That's why it didn't get old. Her presence was so strong, and I just felt it through and through. And then when people were taking pictures, and I'd have this beautiful purple, bright, kind of whitish purple, well-formed, structured orb right there beside me, said, okay, Betsy, I get it. And for me, that's a very simple touch point that brings me into just the joy of being, and the gift and the gratitude of being, in any moment, no matter what it is presenting to me. And this is where that gratitude comes from. And the gratitude never, ever fails me, because I'm just so grateful for everything. And that includes a gratitude for the hardships. And this is so important to stress in our modern world. to embrace these challenges in our life. To view, for example, somebody who seems very kind of tough to deal with, realize that often those are near and dear soul mates, and that we're just trying to teach each other especially challenging lessons. So the more we can embrace the hardships, embrace those challenging people in our lives, and come to show them unconditional love, that can be a tremendously liberating process in its own right.
Okay. If you judge people, you have no time to love them. Mother Teresa said that. Beautiful points, and even gratitude for something that all of us would agree is a horrible obstacle. My situation is, my problem is, finances, divorce, difficult situations, violence. I mean, all sorts of things. It is difficult to get out of a certain perspective, but that perspective locks you in, and it isn't a flow that you should want to do for very long. You have to find the light within, so you don't go without. Okay, Betsy is your guardian angel. I'm going to blow a little bit of sage smoke. It's a trademark patented thing on this show. I do it for every guest. The audience at home, no matter if you're in Germany, New Zealand, Canada, and you're watching this 5 years in the future, you can do this as well. It's getting out of time and space. It's letting the sage smoke come through 2 screens to wherever you're at. I'm going to ask if Eben, and he doesn't have to share anything out loud, but if he wants Betsy to come in extra and put a hand on his shoulder, small of your back, even through the chair, she's probably doing that right now already. Some people start smelling the sage as I just start to light it. Others taste it. So if everyone at home could just breathe more, allow more, I've only got one rule or bit of structure. Ask angels to make it nice. And I say this, don't get caught at the supermarket doing this out loud. People will look at you funny. So do a chubby checker or Elvis, swing your hips in the supermarket. Everyone will laugh and you've made their day. Angels, get me out of my head, into my heart, make this nice. Amen, rock and roll, thank you. Om Sai Ram if you're from India. But ask them to bring you the sage smoke. Catch some flowers if you want. Lorna Byrne, Irish angel mystic, caught daisies and roses. And Jennifer McLean in Laguna Niguel caught 3 flowers plus sage. So what will you allow for, I think, is the message of the show in life. Eben, what are you getting? Is Betsy coming in? Can you have her bring an extra flower or 2 for you that you're like, oh my gosh?
She does. A beautiful lotus. Beautiful lotus, and the smoke has a strong hint of hickory, which I love as a flavor for when I'm cooking. And yes, Betsy, I sense her hand on my left shoulder.
And if when you hear ready from her, you can look up and see the smallest ball of light. I think you said it was blue and white, but she'll do it. You'll have a private experience. It may be peripheral. I always say to folks, the more they resist, because, we're like, oh, I'm not sure I can do this. It'll be more on the peripheral, or, some of my angels do lightning, ice skating, even like inside my eyes. I don't know how to say that one. But most are very gentle. And it's always a reminder. I get really, heavily thinking at times, like we all do, and starting to spin, what is it, a river, a rock, an eddy. And so, you get the same 4 thoughts in a row, and that's when an angel will pop in and kind of pull me out of dive mode. And I start laughing because I'm like, wow, I was heavy thinking there. I'm stubbing this out so I don't smoke out my office. Do you have a reminder that everyone's got helpers? They don't have to do any active listening. They don't have to know any of this stuff. They don't have to think that what we're doing is a big deal, all those experts out there, but they could just allow and trust that they're heard and do the one way that they're already doing. Put the feather down too. So we're all one weighing. And instead of doing one way complaining or judging, oh, I live in, or someone lives in Texas or California and it's bad over there, it's bad here. They don't realize that they're tapping the wrong energy, or not wrong energy, but they're tapping a lower vibration.
Right.
And they're hurting themselves by doing the lower vibration when they could be love. Can you just give us a touch on this whole, you don't have to know it all. You just have to trust, religious, non-religious faith. To me, it's all letting go. How can we just tap what we've got more?
Well, Karen has taught me how to use emotion, the feeling in the heart, and use that as your lead. And in other words, whatever you're trying to achieve in terms of your interrelationships or kind of understanding of challenging situations, etc., feel in your heart. And you can do this in meditation. It's even more effective. but feel in your heart the feeling of success at achieving that particular goal. And just cultivate that feeling in your heart. And what you realize is that it makes it a more likely thing to start evolving. So it's kind of leading with the emotion. And it's not with the kind of cognitive, intellectual structure of success and what that would look like, but truly trying to feel in your heart what that kind of successful completion of that understanding might feel like. And I found that to be a very powerful tool to kind of help me, at many stages in this journey of discovery, is leading with the emotions, and the emotions being that of success at achieving what you're trying to get to.
Oh my gosh. Well, in 2024, whether it's the end of next year, I would love to have you two back for exactly that, to somehow take us through, even if we only did a little special 20-minute extra bonus thing that we could air anytime. But if you wanted to figure out how to do this in this sort of a setting, both of you coming on, that would be incredible for everyone. I think
Let's plan on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Great.
Yay.
So late 2024, we'll get back together, and Karen and I would love to kind of share the latest of all that.
Oh, yes. And maybe we can get, I've got goosebumps and flows everywhere. Maybe we could get the binaural beats going, even though I know they've got to have headphones for that, but still we might as well record it. What? Here's Joy. What does she say? She's an angel. The Joy, everyone's, she makes it easy for you to let go and get all this stuff done that you think is a big deal for the audience. So what does she say about that idea for 2024?
She is totally into it. She is in a state of blistasy.
And then what does she have? Either it's private for you or private for you, and have Betsy kick in as well. What does she have as one more quick topic, though, that I can put this down and you'll start talking about a new topic here or a follow-up?
It's really the world catching on, growing it to the world. There's so many people out there who could benefit from this kind of an understanding to bring kind of peace and harmony into their lives. And I think that is really the dynamic that Joy is presenting, because she is just pure blistasy. And yet she acknowledges there's a gap between her blistasy and that of the world at large. So that's the piece to be filled in.
And you'll connect with her. For folks out there, if you do that jig, do some sort of chubby checker in front of the cucumbers at the supermarket, and you'll find yourself laughing at yourself in the moment. Any of the concerns you had are gone, and you lived in that moment. But watch the reaction 18 feet away as 5 people catch you doing a chubby checker, and they start laughing, and you just tapped the stratosphere of joy that circles the globe. If she's an emotional layer around the planet, you just tapped into that slipstream. Okay, here's an angel named Charlotte. Just picture her as older, a teacher on everyone's team. A little bit like Audrey Hepburn's sister, though. A tough taskmaster for me to get me to pay attention 10 or 12 years ago. But Charlotte's got words of wisdom for us all. Eben, what does she have for all of us?
Pure knowing. Charlotte, that's my kind of mother energy, where I was born. So in many ways, kind of showing the gaps in knowledge, but how they energize the growth and the acquisition of that knowledge. So Charlotte is handing that back beautifully.
And what I'll do is a quick guardian angel at this end, Min, just call her Min. She's light waves of energy and water, very oceany from really far out. You can catch any beach smell if you miss Rehoboth Beach, Bethany Beach. It's overseas, it's Hawaii. Have it come in, and anyone at home as well. All you have to do is get out of what you know, your brain, and allow, let angels do their jobs, and you'll catch. If you have to close your eyes, do your eyes closed, but let them bring you a scent that relaxes you. You can hear wave action, palm fronds. It's like you're in that, is it Old Spice, the men's deodorant commercial, White Stallion on the beach? But, it's angels bringing you that ocean effect out of Hollywood. You can go surfing with angels. Yeah, I had people at my Omega Institute event 3 days. You guys have been there a bunch of times over the years. I'll call them step parents, but Rick Williams and Elaine Williams saw you, I'm going to guess, in 2015 or so, 2017 at Omega. They've talked about it. This is before I had gotten into all that, like in terms of events. So it's full circle. I hope they're watching, saying hi at home. But here's my guardian angel. Oh, and people at that event got to surf with their eyes shut with angels, but 3 people saw each other in that, we'll call it a lucid experience that angels brought people. Okay, what do you have for us just as a reminder from that?
Just that love is what binds us together. And that's present at all levels, from the lowest vibration of the material realm all the way into the deepest and most profound depths of the core and the source of all consciousness of the universe. Every bit of it is subsumed under that kind of beautiful unification of the binding force of love.
Okay, one more angel, a couple of Native American chiefs. We'll wrap it up then with any additional insights from you for the audience. But here's Audrey Hepburn, an angel. This photo, people can let her wink, smile, eyebrow goes up. We all know static photos cannot possibly move, but what are we talking about constantly? Get out of what you know. It's not about the knowing that's up here. It's about that pure knowing that Eben just referenced earlier. And if anybody really wants to go big, have her bring you a French perfume that's yet to be invented, and that's so exotic, it kind of makes your day.
That's what I got, but how do I describe it?
It hasn't been invented yet.
Kind of a mix between gardenia, not gardenia, but wisteria and yeah, I guess gardenias. Those aromas mixed together in proper proportions would give you what I just got from Audrey.
And what's her reminder for like living more, loving more, allowing more?
Just that's what energizes all of our growth, all of our being, is that sense of love and of the higher good and helping others.
Oh, okay, 3 Native American chiefs. They're very down to earth. If anyone thought doing angels or any of this stuff was hard, guess what? This is the easy part. Dull Knife, Red Shirt, Geronimo. The first 2 are proper, formal, yes, no. Geronimo, though, breaks the mold. Yeah, nah, slang, just do it. He knows your situation. Very much action, lightning bolt, dry wit, humor. 170 plus figures. He steals the show. We'll save him. What's the expression? Last but not least. Here's Dull Knife, wisdom with some humor. I'm going to go in close and just catch a little bit of wisdom. But if anybody wants to catch the scent, or Eben, you want to catch that Native American scent, sacred smell, sweetgrass, juniper, desert piñol, sage, tobacco, you get the idea.
Well, a strong hint of tobacco, that's for sure. And also a kind of a very profound example of tough love.
And what are his quick words? Like, I'll mention something from the past. He said, life is a feast, partake.
Dive in without any regrets at all. Full force.
Beautiful. Red Shirt. Lakota Sioux Chief. The gentlest mom in the world. If anybody can think of that family, if it's not your own mom, I mean, we all say that about our own moms, but a mom who just pulls everybody together and is the definition of the ultimate mom of that. So not a manly description, but he's compassion, compassion, compassion. And you can feel him. Anyone going through a lot of difficulty, he should be your number one. He speaks so softly and gently that he helps liberate you from that situation.
Well, he presents a very profound, concrete example of the spirituality of animals in addition to humans, an awareness of how all of life has this intelligence to it.
And does he have a final reminder for everybody?
The final reminder is just to be kind. Be kind to our fellow beings.
Beautiful. And I think about that all the time. I love that I just said think, but I see deer. I'm in San Antonio, north part, so it's very wilderness, red-tailed hawks, all sorts of wildlife, but their presence, their consciousness, you can't deny that there's just this incredibleness to them, if I'm making up a word. their presence. They know what they're doing and they have it together in a way. I don't see deer randomly causing harm for no reason. So thank goodness for that. And that's our opportunity, is simply to be more aware of our actions, consequences, and what we think we're doing to others, we're always doing to ourselves. Here's Geronimo. Now, he can steal the show even when he's up against, a light being, Mary, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, whoever. Luckily, it's not a competition. And what are you getting from Geronimo?
Kind of a deep sense of sorrow as an energizer for positivity. I mean, it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition of the hardships and how they lead to so much potential and growth, but not ignoring the kind of depth of the hardships.
I don't think I've forgotten anything here. Okay, what can we wrap up with? You've covered a lot. Can you talk about, if it's a Texas Hold'em poker game, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't know how to play cards. I don't even know what the rules are. Everyone's sitting at these casino tables, whether they know it or not. It's called life. It's the whole Casablanca. Again, I'm shocked to see there's gambling going on here. Sir, here's your winnings, and arrest the usual suspects. Now, how do we play this game better by not even playing the game? I mean, I would argue that the angels are running the tables. They're the croupiers or the whatever, spinning the wheels, and that every bet you place wins. You just have to place the bet. So talk to us in some sort of metaphoric language here. How can we take advantage more of what we've got here and stop treading water up here?
All is well. That's the statement. All is well. Now, if you can picture, I spent 7 days in coma, was expected to die. My family had very little reason for hope. And then I started fighting the ventilator. And then they pulled out the breathing tube and I said, thank you. And even though the doctors had predicted I'd gone down to a 2% chance of survival with no chance of recovery, a few hours after that prediction, there I was sitting on the bed. Now, my brain was still very much wrecked by the infection. And I didn't even recognize my mother, my sisters, my sons at the bedside. But very quickly, all of my kind of my knowledge of where I'd just been, that extraordinary spiritual journey, was hot and alive in my knowing. In fact, I didn't even remember any of Eben Alexander's life before that coma. When I first woke up, those memories started coming back quickly. But the interesting thing is, in that kind of setting of very close to death, from a should have killed me perfect model of human death, because that's basically what meningitis is, by attacking the human part of the brain. It's a great model for human death, and yet most people do not come back from it if they went as deep as I did. But the interesting thing is, in that setting, I was sitting on the bed, as my sister told me later. I do not remember this, but my youngest sister Phyllis told me much later that I was sitting on the bed and I would look at each person and I would go, all is well. Don't worry. And then I'd go to the next one, and the doctors, the nurses, family, whoever. I was just sharing this beautiful message. And she said it was so surreal that somebody that they thought was so dependent on everybody else and so close to death is sitting there reassuring them all not to worry, that everything is just fine. And I think that's the most important lesson is, the sting of death is something that gets removed through a near-death experience. And through knowledge of this, other people can lose that kind of sting of death with its finality and its bleakness. And what happens is we start to grow into an acknowledgement that all is well. Once that sting is gone and we start to glimpse our kind of broader perspective that we exist as souls over multiple lifetimes with beautiful interrelationships with our fellow beings that keep reshuffling and shifting to help us in learning and teaching these beautiful lessons, you start to realize that all is well. And no matter what the hardships you face, as you start to embrace them, see the learning and teaching value in the challenges and hardships, all is well. That's what starts to emerge as your dominant vibration and mode of being. So just remember, this can be very liberating by showing you the positive side of all of this that allows us to grow into this kind of knowledge, this kind of behavior, this kind of activity, this kind of choice in how we view ourselves, our meaning and purpose in the universe, and also our interrelationships with all of our fellow beings, and how that unconditional love can be such a powerful gift to energize this transformation. So just always remember, all is well.
So the Ferrari, that's the mind, or we'll make the Ferrari the heart, but the gearbox, the shifting, is the mind inside the Ferrari. And so we're in neutral a lot. We think we're going somewhere. We're seeing the same signposts over and over again, because if we're going anywhere, it's doing figure eights or loops on the local highway, but we're never actually going anywhere. Not a real trip, not out of state, or taking it up to speed. And what you're suggesting, again, by acknowledging that all is well and perfect as it is right now, everyone's getting exactly what they need in the present moment. Angels will remind you that all the time. It helps you shift your consciousness and get that gear out of neutral, out of stuck, out of the eddies, out of the spinning, out of that financial situation, the divorce, to a broader perspective that allows you to live more, love more, and allow more if and when you figure it out. It may not be this lifetime. It may be 5 lifetimes from now. I can do it, 5. But anyone at any point can have a transformation, a shift, a growth, a spurt. Maybe it's in little steps. Where you stumble is usually where you took a misstep, and that is often our biggest lesson in front of us. So while we think someone's a jerk or reacting to this bit of news or that thing over there, it's actually us that's flowing I got stressed with that too. It's us that are resisting what already is. And
Right.
So can you take us one last time? Yeah.
I was just going to say our beliefs, thoughts, and attitudes are very crucial because they actually determine a lot of our emerging realities. So it's important to, be aware of kind of your thoughts and your attitudes about things, because they will lead you in a given direction. And much of the kind of apparent limitation in our societally taught beliefs are not real. That's what this whole field of inquiry and investigation, this entire discussion we've been having for the last hour or so, is about, that shifting understanding of reality that can be so much more liberating and refreshing.
Ah, beautiful. Eben, thank you so much for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love. I am just super grateful, thankful for you being here, to have made your acquaintance. And I know the audience has enjoyed both episode 35 with you and Karen Newell and this episode. Don't forget, Karen is out solo as well. October 22nd was her episode. This should be November 19th. Eben, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Michael Andre, thanks so much for having me on. It's great being with you as always. And I look forward to getting back together with you and Karen sometime in late 2024.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you.